And we are so honored to have with us tonight Aziz Abusarah. So thank you for being with us. But I want to just provide a little bit of background information about Aziz before we begin. So Aziz is a peace builder, an entrepreneur, a National Geographic explorer, a TED Fellow, and renowned speaker and trainer on conflict resolution and responsible travel. He is the co-founder of Mejdi Tours, which is a travel company that's on a mission to transform tourism into a global force of citizen diplomacy. He's also the founder of Interact, which is a nonprofit dedicated to Middle East peace. Aziz has won numerous awards, including from the United Nations, the Institute of International Education, and the Explorers Club. He's consistently named one of the world's 500 most influential Muslims by the Royal Islamic Strategic Studies Center in Jordan. He has written opinion pieces for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Al-Quds, and Haaretz, and has also been published by CNN and Al Arabiya. So with that, I want to say again, welcome and thank you, Aziz, for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So it's been something of a whirlwind that you've been on the heels of this book coming out. Tell us just a few of the places that you've been recently. I know it's been quite a few spots and destinations and conversations. So where have you been lately?
So first, I want to say this is my first day in my house since the book was launched. So I just got home. And yeah, where have we been? So many places. We started in New York, Washington, Chicago, Bay Area, Los Angeles, back to DC in New York, then Jerusalem, Philly, Boston. I'm probably missing some stuff. Yeah, Jerusalem, Jaffa. And then we'll continue. Next week, we'll go back to New York and then Dallas, Texas. And then we heading to Paris, Brussels, maybe Luxembourg, and London.
That is truly incredible.
And exhausting. And exhausting.
Exhausting. Absolutely. Sleep on the plane, I hope, right? Absolutely. Well, what's been, I guess, most surprising and most encouraging as you've made your way around these many destinations in front of a lot of different audiences? What are some of the things that have surprised you and encouraged you as you've kind of had a chance to talk about this book and your journey?
Yeah, I think there's this feeling that people often say, what bleeds lead, and people come and are attentive to all the negative news, and it's what sells often. And what's been incredible is seeing how many people are hungry for a different message, a message that does uphold justice and equality, but also upholds peace and the us coming together instead of against each other. So almost everywhere we've been, it was a sold out room. So many people are getting the book. The fact that it's a New York Times bestseller, I think, says that people do want this message and this idea that, oh, it doesn't sell and it's not popular. I think it's just that it doesn't find its way to people. It's often silenced, it's often ignored. But the moment people know about it, it's very popular.
What, I guess, misconceptions, maybe not the right word, but what are, I guess, some of the the biggest challenges to this this message, this idea that peace is possible, that you come across when talking about this, in front of an American audience, in front of people that maybe only know the situation through a television screen or through what they read on the internet? What are some of the biggest, I guess, things that you're able to speak into that are surprising for people or that they just, didn't know?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. One is a concept that a people, regardless who, Jews, Muslims, Arabs, whichever, are inherently violent. And this is one of the misconceptions we have to always talk about. None of us are inherently violent. None of us are inherently hateful. None of us were born that way. And it's just like it's something we learn, then it's something we can unlearn as well. I think one of my favorite poems by Padraig Otuma, he says, when I was a child, I learned to count to five, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But now I've learned to count lives, one life, one life, one life, one life, one life. And this is part of the journey we all have to go through, is to unlearn some of the things that makes us dehumanize people. The other misconception is the idea that being a peacemaker is a naive thing. If you support peace, if you're working for peace, you must be naive and you must be hippie and you must be, I don't know, drank the Kool-Aid kind of thing. And the weirdest thing is when this comes from religious people, because Maoz and I often talk about how the name of God in the Bible and the name of God in the Quran, it's in both of them, God calls himself peace. So it's one of the names of God is peace. And so when people say peace is impossible or peace is naive, and then call themselves people of faith, we have to remind them that when you doubt peace, you actually doubt the existence of God. You're saying God is impossible. So you can't really go to a worship service and be worshiping God and in the same time saying God is impossible. So that's one couple of the things that keep coming up. A third thing, I think people got used to the concept of it's just how politics work. It's just how the world works. War, conflict, violence. It's just how the world works. And we don't accept that in anything else, and we shouldn't. It's not how the world works. It's we create the world we want to live in. We shape the world we want to live in. And often one of the response we give is, cancer is also natural in this world. We don't sit around and say, well, this is what the world does. We try to cure it. And we don't call anybody who's trying to cure cancer, even if they're unsuccessful, doing research for dozens of years without coming with a vaccine for it. We don't call them failure. We keep strengthening. We don't say they're naive. We keep working on it. We keep supporting them morally, financially, all of that. Just because we failed once or twice or 10 times doesn't mean that's it. And so war to us is the same as cancer. It's a disease that we should be curing and healing.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. Something that I was struck by again and again is the way that this book it comes back to the notion that kind of what you're talking about. Instead of I'm thinking of this as this problem that's intractable, and oftentimes because of maybe people associating it with the religious roots that they associate with. But you describe again and again that a lot of these problems are human problems, that these are man-made problems, but perhaps the way in which we frame them is that something almost of like an excuse that because it involves religion and these thousands of years that it's somehow intractable and not able to be addressed in a way as if we regarded it as a human problem with perhaps human solutions. I guess, do you see religion being used as that as kind of it's kind of more a barrier to peace than something that people believe encourages them to believe peace is possible?
Yeah, my argument in that is I think religion is being used to promote war. It's not the cause of war. And just like it's being used to promote conflict, it can be used to promote peace as well. And we've seen it in the last few years, for example, with Pope Francis and Pope Leo. Both have been very outspoken for peacemaking. I've had the honor of meeting both of them. And when we met both Francis, he told us conflict is normal. It's violence that we need to end.
Uh,
There'll always be disagreement among us. It's just we need to learn how to solve it. And he said the only place that doesn't have disagreement, or two places that don't have disagreement, one is a dictatorship. Most of us don't want to live in one. And the second is a cemetery. And most of us also don't want to be there. And so it's okay to have disagreement. It's just we have to solve it without using violence. And I believe Islam, I believe Judaism, I believe Christianity. Uh, it's the same. You can use them to promote violence and you can use them to promote peace. And people, I think, cynically use religion to advance what they want. It's almost like, the first in the first chapter in Genesis, it talks about God creating the world and it says God creates man in his image. And I think what ends up happening is the opposite here. We create religion and God in our image that wants violence, and then we find the scripture or the story that will give us that and say, oh, well, God supports me in going and doing whatever I want to do.
You mentioned it a little bit already tonight, this misconception about what people have in their mind of people who advocate for peace. But you talk in the book about the notion, oh, it's probably somebody who wears a lot of tie-dye, kind of this hippie notion. But you talk about in pretty raw ways just how difficult the work is, and the incredible, challenge that it is. At the same time, we think of in the Beatitudes of Jesus calls peacemakers blessed. And I wanted to ask you, have you experienced that to be true in this work of peacemaking? How have you experienced um, blessing in the course of this work?
I believe so. I think it's very hard work and it brings a lot of challenges. It's you have people who doubt you, you have people who doubt your motivations, you have people who are angry, you think you are a traitor, so many different things that come with it. But there's nothing more destructive than bitterness and hate. It leaves you empty from the inside. And so peace work might be difficult, but it is much easier than being filled with hate and emptiness and wanting to hurt somebody else, having resentment. These are emotions that don't just hurt the other person. In most cases, it never hurts the other person. You live with it and it hurts you. So as hard as peacemaking is and as hard as peace can be, it is much better than the alternative. I think there is a quote, I'm trying to remember who said it was one of the Israeli prime ministers who said, it's better to prefer the pain of peace than whatever the good that war can bring.
Um, Another framing that I appreciate that this book and your work with Maoz brings about is this notion of not framing anything anymore between Israeli and Palestinian or Jew and Muslim, but between people who have come to see the future as peace, and I believe you phrase as those who just quite aren't right there yet.
Right.
And I guess when you encounter those people, wherever they're coming from, that aren't quite there yet, what level of like being misunderstood are you satisfied with? Or I guess what I mean to say is obviously it's going to be something that takes a long time for a lot of people, or there's going to be, like, as you've encountered, very difficult opposition. But how do you decide when it's just best to disengage and wait a little bit longer versus leaning into a hard conversation or conflict that maybe is not necessarily easy to lean into? What how do you
Yeah.
do that? I guess that delicate dance that you have to do every day.
So I'll start by saying Maoz is much better at this than me. Um, it's something we learn with time and get better at. Not if you catch me in the wrong time, I might not be the best at it, but it's something I try to work on every day is how to get better at not arguing for the sake of arguing and arguing for the sake of winning an argument because you can never really in these topics you don't win because you showed somebody they are wrong. That almost never works. Instead, what I do now and what Maoz does is we try to share stories and try to hope and we hope that people will listen to these stories and they might not in the moment reflect on it, but stories stay with you. And there's so much research that shows our brain changes when we hear stories. It's very different than when we hear a bunch of facts. Like even when I tell people, okay, 70,000 people have been killed, more than 70,000 people in Gaza, it doesn't really move people. They're like, yeah, that sounds a lot. But then if I tell, as we do in the future piece, when we tell the story of one of those people, like Hind Rajab, which we tell her story, it's much more moving. One person's story. So arguing about is it 70,000 or is it 100,000?
Hmm.
That doesn't, somebody who doesn't believe in any of this, it's not going to change their minds. And the same, it's vice versa. Talking about the 1,200 Israelis who were killed on October 7th, if I'm arguing with people about how many of them civilians, how many of them soldiers, it's such a needless argument. Instead, I tell the story of Maoz and his family, and that's much more likely to open their minds and open their hearts rather than just arguing over a bunch of facts. And the moment people open their hearts and their minds, you can then talk about the other stuff. But it just makes no sense to start with that. And too often we argue about things that are not going to create any change. They're not going to really make any difference. And it becomes more about us than about the cause we are trying to promote. It's about me winning the argument, not about justice. It's not about peacemaking. It's not about reconciliation. It's about me beating you and you
Hmm.
not listening to what I'm having to say. So it's kind of taking a step back and saying it's okay to lose an argument as long as I'm able to get somebody to reflect on what's happening and maybe listen to a story. If I have time, I can tell you a really powerful story. It's not in the book. I met, and Susan, if she's here, knows this story. I met a man named Daryl Davis a few years back. And Daryl is an African American who's a jazz player, very, very talented. His parents were diplomats. And he started playing music in clubs and bars and all over the United States. And one day he was in the South and had this guy come to him after, start asking him question, and then he goes, "You know, I'm a KKK members." And Daryl was like, "No, you're not." And he's like, "Yeah." And he showed him his membership card. Apparently, the KKK has membership cards. I didn't know that. And and he sits with him. He doesn't leave. He sits with him, and he said for the next couple of hours, this guy said every racist thing you can imagine. And he told me a few of them. He told him black people have smaller brains, they all live on welfare, they dumber, they this, they that. And he just went on saying horrible, horrible stuff. And I'm listening to him, I'm like, I wouldn't have been able to sit for 2 hours listening to a guy just doing racist rant. He's like, I didn't say a word. I just listened and showed him that I was listening. And then at the end, I said, now that you finished, can I respond? And it's like, now that he said every awful thing he had nothing else to say. And he actually listened. And eventually, and he said, like, he told him, look, you listen to my music. Do you think a person with a smaller brain can play such good music? He's like, no, you're probably right. And then he told him, my parents are diplomats. We never were on welfare. We actually doing fine. And so he started dispelling, he told him his life story that kind of just his personal story challenged this whole concept. And by the end of multiple conversations, this guy left the KKK and it became the calling of Daryl. And he's helped so far more than 200 white supremacists, neo-Nazis leave that path and become peacemakers. And he can do it because it's not about winning the argument. It's about how can I get people to listen to what I'm saying? And listening to stories is much more powerful than listening to just a bunch of facts. Now, with that being said, it is hard practice. And I see myself even 25 years later, more now, 27 years later of being in this world of peacemaking, I find myself going back to the old self of, oh, let me show you what it means. And have to take a breath back and be like, okay, that's not going to work. It's me trying to win an argument, and that's not good. So it's a practice.
One of the stories that we read was the story of when you were with Angela and Rabbi. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name
Rabbi
right now.
Paula.
Rabbi Paula, thank you. And with the traffic ticket, essentially,
Yeah.
and there was the argument, but they were able to kind of come and help you kind of in that moment, kind of redirect the situation. But I think about how you mentioned also like how the role that the teacher had in your life, and it's these little moments about helping us reframe. And I guess just speaking to how sometimes it is something very small that can help in a big way as we're trying to engage in these difficult things, having people alongside us, that it doesn't have to just be something we do solo. I guess that's what stood out to me about how Angela helped you in that moment. But the notion and the whole story of the fact that this is you and Maoz going together, because I think sometimes we feel like, what can I do as an individual versus what can we do together? So yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to
I'll
that at all.
just add something about this. Peacemaking is not for perfect people. It's not for people who have no feelings. I think I talk in the book about being a peacemaker. You face the worst of a humanity, but you also find the best of a humanity. And it's a challenge to deal with it. And the moment you become perfect, you lose touch with reality. If nothing moves you, if you don't get upset, if you don't cry, if you don't have weakness, then you can't empathize with people who are suffering. You can't be, people will not see you as somebody who understands what they're going through, and so they're not going to listen to you. And as much as, in that moment when I meet the cop and he's punishing Angela for being a good person, and I'm frustrated and I'm angry and I want to yell at him and tell him how bad of a person he is. That's part I'm not happy with it, but in the same time, I need to be with those feelings and then work them out. It's something if I didn't have any of those feelings, then I would have lost part of that humanity of my humanity. It's also the trauma you that keeps coming back. And in that moment for me it was a lot of earlier trauma that just
Yeah.
all flashed back in front of me. The important part is do you have good partners and good people who are around you to also help you in those moments? It's not that you become perfect, but if you have people around you who can support you, who can stand with you, who can help you, then it becomes much easier to do this path. And in this case, I had Rabbi Pola who came to me and was like, just get in the car and don't say anything. And you need to have people who you trust that I was willing, with all my pride, I was willing to say, okay, and I go to the car and I just don't talk to the police officer anymore, even though I really wanted to explain to him how bad he is. But I listened to Rabbi Paula and then we processed it after together. And those relationships are important. You cannot, I really think you cannot be a peacemaker on your own. It's impossible.
When it comes to the role of forgiveness in the work that you're doing and the challenge of forgiveness, and not just one time, but multiple times coming back and again to forgiveness, do you run up against anybody who would prefer versus the raw honesty and difficulty of forgiveness and naming reality as it is versus more just kind of forgetting and putting aside and not really addressing the difficulty? How do you contrast the importance of actually, like you've said, like speaking about the difficulty, naming the thing that has happened versus just saying, we're not going to discuss that. We're all, kind of almost like a false peace. How is it that you continue to come back again to this, real and raw notion of forgiveness?
It's a fascinating thing because when I talk to Israelis and Palestinians about it, what I've noticed is many of us have different interpretation of what forgiveness means. And so people will say, I believe forgiveness is important or I don't. And then you ask them what it means and you have totally different interpretation. For example, one of my friends who I really, really love, he says, I'm willing to do reconciliation, but I'm not willing to do forgiveness. And when I ask him, how does he process the difference? And he says, reconciliation is the middle ground. But the more I talk to him, he's already there. He forgave the people who've
Mm,
murdered somebody in their family, but he just cannot say, I forgive. Like
mm,
he's done it, but he cannot use those words. And
mm,
there's, I think, to some people at least, a stigma of forgiveness meaning condoning what happened to you. And we have to take a step back and say, no, forgiveness doesn't mean you say the injustice and the pain and the wrong that happened to me is okay. It's saying, I will not let it define me. It's saying, I don't have hatred toward even the person who've done it towards me. It says, I don't want to seek revenge. It says, I'm willing to even potentially talk to them if there's an opportunity. In most cases, that's not even possible. But he's willing to do all the things we just talked about, but he wouldn't call it forgiveness. And so there's that. It's the thought of what does forgiveness really mean. And for me, forgiveness meant not being a slave to the person who killed my brother, because every action for a few years I've done was based on the action of this person. I was reacting to what they did. And I needed forgiveness so I can be free from that yoke of being controlled by somebody else, where I don't have freedom to make my own decisions. So in some ways, forgiveness is a selfish act in some way
mm.
because it actually saves you before it saves anybody else. And the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation for me, you don't need the other person to do anything for forgiveness. It's fully, you can do it whether they seek it or not, whether they repent or not, whether they change or not, it doesn't matter. You still can choose to forgive. So you have, forgiveness gives you a lot of power. It's your choice. It's your ability. If they continue to do whatever they do and you choose to forgive, that gives you power, not weakness. While reconciliation, you cannot reconcile with somebody against their will. It's a little harder. You need to come together to be able to reconcile, and that takes two parties to dance.
Now, thank you. There was a quote from the book I wanted to ask you about. You write that we have learned that love is stronger than death, that there is always the potential for hope, but first you must believe that it is possible. When you talk about hope, I guess in the same way of forgiveness, that can be a word that means a lot of different things to different people, depending on who you're talking to or what that might mean. But when you speak of hope there, I guess I want to ask what is that hope primarily in, or where does what's that hope based on, this potential for hope that you have, and when you're speaking about this mission for peace that you're on?
Um, there's a quote that we often say, it's attributed to Franz Kafka. I did some research. He's likely not the one who said it, but it keeps everywhere I look, it keeps saying it's attributed to him. And he says, by believing passionately in something that still does not exist, we create it. The non-existent is whatever we have not sufficiently desire. And I really like these words a lot. It's one of my favorite things to live by. By believing passionately in something that still does not exist, we create it. That to me is hope. Is you don't look at the reality and say, I accept this. You create the reality you want. And knowing that I can change the reality in the world around me, that's hope. Knowing, believing, understanding that this is possible. And in my circumstances, I've seen it happen. I've worked in many conflict zones and I've seen places that had it really, really terrible. A place like Rwanda, where 1 million people killed in 3 months. A place like Northern Ireland, where you had a religious war between Protestants and Catholics, and every day there were bombings. Every day, people being killed and shot and hurt. I stayed in a hotel in um, downtown Belfast. It was bombed over 30 times during the Troubles. Every year it used to be bombed. And yet you can go now there and that conflict is there's a peace agreement. You can go to Rwanda. It's one of the safest countries in Africa. You can walk everywhere and people are not seeking vengeance and not trying to kill each other. So we know it's possible based on history. Science proves it's possible. Having hope is based for peace, is based on science, is based on track record. We solved more conflicts, we solved way more conflicts without violence in history in the last 100 years than we have solved with violence. Actually, whenever we've used violence in most circumstances, it caused situations to get worse and more conflicts started out of that use of violence. And the Middle East is a great example for that. You go to Iraq, you try to solve a dictatorship with a war. The whole region has been in turmoil since then. So we can learn a little bit more about how diplomacy works and the importance of diplomacy and the importance of peacemaking.
There was another quote that's come up again, from your book, but it was early on in the book. You talked about the way in which, our posture of distrust, and you speak about this notion that, it's something that can dehumanize both sides, but basically the notion that, it's easier sometimes just to not trust and not engage, that we can basically how people can be conditioned to primarily see other people as potential threats. And
Mhm.
I just wanted to ask, like, how have you found people able to disarm that? Is it through, just like you've said, storytelling, getting to know one another? But when I imagine, like, there's a point where that's not even possible. I mean, what are the steps that even get to a place where you're able to disarm that deeply entrenched distrust, that dehumanization?
Yeah, I think stories are definitely important. Getting to know the people who you don't know and you're afraid of, trying to see what life is like for them. I'm thinking of some examples that would make it easier because it's not only in Israel and Palestine, it's also in the States. I did one of our trips with Majdi Tours I've run was a blue red tour. We call it a red blue tour, where we
Mm,
hired a Republican and a Democrat to co-lead a tour together in
yeah.
Washington, D.C. And one of the first time we've done it, it was kind of a test. So I just brought friends from Washington, D.C. to come with me and do a run and see how it's going to go. And part of one of the stops we went to was a neighborhood called Anacostia in Washington. None of the people in the group has ever been in Anacostia before. It's a historic neighborhood. It's where Frederick Douglass used to live. It's a beautiful neighborhood. It's a black neighborhood. And so none of these people have ever been there. None of them have ever thought of going there. Yet it's our area. We live like 10 minutes away from it. And yet none of us have gone there. And we started having this conversation, and mostly it's because of fear, it's because of ignorance, it's because of these kind of invisible walls that we build around ourselves. And so it's impossible then to trust somebody if you never have contact with them. And the moment you go there and we start talking to people there, and suddenly everyone's like, these are the nicest neighbors you could have. Some like generous, welcoming. We connected with different community leaders in the area, and it was just so incredible. But they didn't know it. They didn't know it because they never crossed because of that fear and that ignorance. So it's normal you don't trust somebody. You have so much stereotypes about them. You'll have to know them, recognize them, listen to them so you can overcome that ignorance and that fear to build trust. Trust doesn't come on its own, and it's not going to come by reading a book as well. You have to go and meet people. Reading a book is maybe a good start to understand, but you have to connect with people directly.
You mentioned trust, and I'm just curious. Uh, do you still encounter a lot of people when you and Maoz are on these visits or on these tours, sharing your story, that are still perhaps skeptical or are not really sure? Like, okay, are they really friends, or is this what they say it is? I mean, how often do you encounter that, and then how do people find out the reality of the nature of your relationship?
We don't encounter much of that because Maoz and I usually start our talks with a hug and we
Yeah.
end our talks with a hug. And usually people come to us and say, we've been to many peace meetings. We've never seen such display of affection. And we do it on purpose. We love each other. We care for each other. But we realized very early on in our work is that in peacemaking, we don't have enough symbolism that can motivate people and give hope. And
Mm.
without having a symbol that people can believe in and follow, you kind of don't give something people can hold on and believe in. And so we started doing the hug before and after. And it's, I think to some people, it's more powerful than the whole talk we do. Just that in the beginning and the end, us hugging each other, or in the middle of the talk, if there's a moment that's emotional, which happens all the time, hold hands or put your hand and he'll put his hand on my shoulder, I'll put my hand on his shoulder. It's something people don't expect us to do. So creating those symbolism is very important. And I cannot tell you how many times people come and tell us this was so moving and this has made them think about why do we not see more of these symbolism.
Wow. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little about some of the feedback you've received about the book so far, because again, it is beautifully constructed in this shared story, and that's grounded in the land, but also grounded in your two stories, how you came together, but also your histories. And it's beautifully done. But I'd love to hear what some of the response has been like as it started to get into people's hands and they're encountering it.
Really incredible. I keep waiting for the negative ones because they'll come. But so far, 99% has been overwhelmingly positive. And my favorite is when people tell us, I love the book. I don't agree with everything you said, but I love how you handled the conversation. And that's a goal because even among Maoz and I, we write different histories, different stories that don't match with each other. So the goal isn't to make you agree with me or agree with Maoz, but to model the conversation. And so when someone comes and says, I read it, I really struggled when you said this or when Maoz said that, I'm like, perfect. If you agreed with everything, maybe you didn't need the book. I wanted to challenge you. I want you to
Yeah.
look at it and say, what can I learn from this? The model of the conversation, the fact we did I say something, Maoz says something back and forth 2, 3 times, and then it goes into us saying something together. And so we might write a different history and different story, but eventually we'll find a common ground in every chapter. That's how we modeled it. My voice, his voice, and then our voices together. So it's been very, very positive, and especially from both Palestinians and Israelis, which
Mm.
that's the crowd that will, if they're not happy with it, will hurt the most for the two
Yeah.
of us. And I just came from being in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, and there was a big peace festival where thousands of people showed up in Tel Aviv. Israelis and Palestinians were there. And so many people have read the book, and we had literally a line of people waiting to take photos with us with the book in their hands and asking us to sign it. And I'm talking about hundreds of people,
Huh.
Israelis and Palestinians. And to me, that was the most powerful moment for us. And we still don't have the book in Arabic and Hebrew. We will by the end of the year, hopefully. But that having Israelis and Palestinian lining up saying this was incredible, we love the book, that's that's icing on the cake, I guess.
That's a beautiful, yeah, picture. Thank you for sharing that. It's incredible. I wanted to make sure I opened up an opportunity for anybody here in the room tonight or also joining us on Zoom for a question. If you had something about the book or something that Aziz brought up tonight, I wanted to make sure we opened up an opportunity for that. So if there's a question, feel online, raise your hand, or in person, raise your hand as well. But I don't know if you had a question, but otherwise, yep, we got one back here. Let me unmute the house mic. 1 second.
Okay.
Go for it.
Can you hear me, Aziz?
I can hear you.
You talked in the
Feedback.
Now I don't.
Yep, try it again. Why don't you come up here maybe and ask it? Sorry about that. Yeah.
Wait. Important thing. My cat wants to say hello. Hello. You want to say hi? Uh, I don't want to tell you the truth, but the cat wrote half of the book.
Good. All right. So several times in the book that you mentioned explicitly and implicitly about even the populace, our friends, our neighbors, we can feel one way, but we get misled by our leaders, and our leaders have failed, in many cases. And clearly, many of us feel like that's going on here in the United States. You mentioned that in a couple of weeks, you're going to be going down to Dallas. And I think my family and I lived in Plano for 30 plus years, and you're probably aware of the issues that are going on, down there right now with the Islamic center, Islamic community being built, and Governor Abbott and so forth, really coming out against it. And that's just another example of, I think, where our leaders and our politicians are um, are making things much worse than they need to be. They're throwing fuel on the fire. Um, they're really exacerbating the situation. What can we do as mere citizens to help influence, do a better job of influencing our political leaders and letting them know that the approaches that they're taking are detrimental as opposed to positive in so many cases?
Yeah, I think this is really good. Really good question because politicians can thrive on division when there's ignorance and when people fear and mistrust their neighbors. So if you don't know any Muslims, you think an Islamic center is, I don't know, a celebration of almost terrorism. That's how they will, or Sharia law, which by the way is an oxymoron because Sharia literally just means law. It's the law that scares everybody. Uh, so what we can do is try to overcome and amplify voices of people who are helping to end that ignorance, to bring voices of Muslims. I do Islamophobia trainings for communities, companies, all of that. around the United States. And one of the things I share, for example, is when Muslims are discussed in American media, and by the way, not only Fox News, even the most liberal media, the amount of times a Muslim is brought into the discussion is only 3%. So if Muslims discussed 100 times this week about this issue, for example, of the mosque and the Islamic Center, a Muslim will be invited only 3 times to talk about it. And so most of the opinions that Americans have about Muslims are not from a Muslim person. When you ask people, do you have a Muslim friend or do you even know somebody Muslim? Majority of Americans will tell you no. So our job, those of us who are more aware, is to tell the stories of your Muslim friends, Muslim neighbors. Make sure you do reach out to the Muslim community, be there with them, get their stories and amplify it. That's, I think, one of the first and most important thing we have to do is to bring down those barriers and that ignorance that exists. And second, we need to show up and be able to make it clear to our politicians that we don't support these kind of policies. Politicians care about votes first and foremost. And if we able to create a momentum, we can change that. We can make them fear losing those votes. And by the way, there's a lot of research that says you don't even have to be a majority to change these kind of things, these kind of realities. Most research shows that 3.5% of people who active consistently in a nonviolent way can change policies and social justice movements can succeed with 3.5%. So it just takes sustained activism. And by sustained activism, it's not a protest once every 3 months. It's something that happens every day, every week, every few days, and different elements of it. And there's a whole campaigns of how somebody can do it. But if we can get enough people to believe that our voices do matter, really there's no way we could lose this. I don't want to say fight because I don't like that word, but this cause of making sure there's equality and there's justice and there's peace in our own communities and not division.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions on that, either online or in person? Just wanted to make sure, give them a chance. You mentioned that stat on the 3 out of 100. I'm curious, when it comes to the reception of the book, have you found, I mean, you mentioned it being received in Israeli or Palestinian audiences. Have you found that in terms of American audiences, is it across the spectrum that it's been received, or has it been tended to come from one side or the other? You mentioned red, blue in the tours. Have you found it to be kind of welcomed by all sides?
I hope so. It's hard to tell when it's in an audience where you don't know everybody in, which is good.
Yeah.
If they come from red or blue, I hope we have Republicans who come, independents who come. And by the way, this is interesting how politics work. There was a polling by an Israeli American Palestinian organization, a coalition of peace building groups about who supports peacemaking in Israel and Palestine and who doesn't, and who believes among Republicans and Democrats, who believes we should invest more in weapons versus invest more in peacemaking. You know, the US right now only invests in weapons and military in the Middle East. Zero money goes to peacemaking. And not only Republicans were on the side of peacemaking investment, MAGA, people who identified themselves as MAGA, almost 2/3 of them say the US should be spending more money and more energy in advancing peacemaking than they do when it comes to military. So even among the most right, we have allies with us, and they think we should be pushing for peace. It's just if you listen to certain news outlets, you would think everybody on the right is just wants an everlasting war, but they being misled by politicians, as we talked, and by media to believe that it's the only option. And it's on us to start reaching out and talk to those communities, not shun them off, not fight with them, but explain to them and show them and give them examples and tell stories of people from that region so they understand that the US isn't doing what they want. They're not listening to their constituents.
Well, I wanted to thank you again. We have a question again, Stephanie. Yeah,
If you have time, Eric. Sorry, were you gonna?
yep, no, we do. Go for it.
Okay. Aziz, thank you so much for being with us. It's so incredible to hear from you. And my question is half baked, so bear with me. But I never heard the Kafka quote that you mentioned earlier, and I'm so drawn to that for so many reasons. I don't know if you know much about biocentrism, but I was thinking too about the science of how humans interact with the world and create the world.
Mhm.
And so I was thinking about that concept, and you mentioned science as it relates to hope, which I think is really compelling. But I was thinking about our book group within our church community read a book about the vanishing church recently and how faith in America has seen a decline, and especially faith in terms of politically moderate faith has seen a decline. And what does that mean for democracy? And I'm thinking about that quote that you mentioned by believing passionately in something that still does not exist, we create it. And I'm wondering about the role of prayer or faith in creating the type of world that we want to see, how manifesting our belief through prayer or through faith practices can help design a world of hope. What would you tell people who wondered about the role of faith in the quest for hope?
Yeah, I wish Maoz was here because he would have loved this question. He talks about how at the beginning of this journey, he was 100% secular, and through the work we are doing, he's come to faith. And he's come to faith by realizing the power of what faith does when it comes to imagining something that does not exist and bring it into existence, the role of what he calls a field of dreams, that if you don't dream, you have nowhere to go. The Bible does say where there is no vision, people perish. So there is definitely a strong part. I I went to a Bible college and I went to an Islamic school. As a kid, I went to an Islamic school, and then later on, I went to a Bible college. And I've read both texts from cover to cover multiple times. And I find it really hard understanding people who don't see, especially the New Testament, as a book about social justice and nonviolence. It's you have to really stretch it to get out. And I have those discussions. I went to a very conservative college when I did my Bible college, and you have to really, really stretch it to be super pro-war, reading Jesus' teaching of love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. All reading, I've read pretty much everything from the early church fathers, the first 300 years of Christianity, from Clement to Irenaeus to Origen to Tertullian, all the Justin Martyr, all these guys. And pretty much all of them not only were against violence, this will make some people struggle what I'm going to say. Most of them were against military service. Most of them were against police service. They were hardcore to a point that most will not be happy reading it. But that was how the churches started. You might disagree with them, but I'm just sharing how it started. It was super anti anything that has to do with force. And it's only after Christianity became the religion of the empire that all these things started to change, where big part of what faith has to do with peace and war, it became suddenly going more and more toward let's do crusades and let's do this war and that war. But it was government misusing faith, in my opinion, rather than the other way around. It's not religion that brought violence to the Roman Empire. It's the Roman Empire that brought violence into Christianity. And the same, by the way, with Islam. For example, it used to be not allowed in Islam to use catapults. For the first 400 years of Islam, catapults were illegal to be used. And the reason why, it was considered a mass destruction weapon. And when you shoot a catapult, it might kill a woman or a child. And it took 400 years until there was a war and Muslims were losing. And this one religious figure said, I think it's okay because blah, blah, blah. He figured out a justification, but it wasn't really because he wanted to give a justification. It was the government wanted it, and they found a guy who would give them whatever they wanted. And that's how it worked. So I would, maybe I'll end by this, another challenge to the church. This Easter, I went to church with my wife, and I was struck by something I never noticed before. In the prayers, the church prayed for leaders, which makes sense. It says in the Bible to pray for leaders, so I get it. And then the other group they prayed for were soldiers. And I was surprised that there was not any prayer for peacemakers. We pray, and then I thought, I've been to church many times, and prayer for military is quite common. Prayer for peacemakers is not common. And maybe this is where one area churches can make a big change is making prayer. If the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers, shouldn't we uplift peacemaking in every church service? And instead of only uplifting military, because what is the message we're sending to the children? What is the message we're sending to the members? Is what's more important. And again, I know this is a challenging topic for many churches, but it's something to reflect on.
Wow. Wow. Amen. Yeah. That's beautiful words. And this has been an incredible opportunity to hear from you, to learn from you, and to have the gift of this book that we've been working through together as a community here. So thank you.
I see a question. Do you want me to answer it? I haven't read it yet.
In the chat. Yeah, it looks like
Yes.
if you have time, it looks like there's one more question. Yeah, Tom
I'm
writes.
fine.
Yeah,
I have
he
nowhere
writes.
to go. I'm home.
Well, you know,
Suggest.
rest time is important. You got to recharge the battery. How do you suggest that we diffuse tensions before they erupt rather than dealing with them after the fact?
Wow, that is incredible. Conflict prevention is significantly more important than conflict resolution. It is hard because um, when there is no problem yet, often nobody wants to solve it until it erupts. And I remember talking to a professor at Columbia University before all the crazy stuff happened recently in Colombia. And he said for 10 years, he's an expert on conflict resolution. He's been going to the administration saying, we should start this conversation with Jewish students, Muslim students, Arabs, talk about peace building, bring it to the whole campus at large. And they kept saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. The problem is, it is broken. They just don't see it. And then when things erupted, they came to him and said, how do we fix it? And he's like, it's a million times harder to fix something after it erupts than before. So how do we do that? I think we start the conversation now. We don't wait until something goes wrong. We make peacemaking as part of our regular conversations. How do we disagree with each other? How do we talk about different opinions? How do we deal with anger? How do we deal with trauma, with pain? These are conversations that I think need to happen. And then we develop programs that help with that, especially with younger people. So for us, Maoz and I, we started a center in Nazareth in which we creating a dual narrative museum. And I'm hoping one day to be able to create the same thing in the States. And it's going to be online as well. It's dualnarrative.org. And the idea of it, you go online and you will find stories, videos of people telling their stories, Israelis and Palestinians that don't agree with each other. But an Israeli can go, a Jewish person can go and learn what Palestinians think, and vice versa. A Muslim, a Palestinian, an Arab can go and learn what Israelis think. And we take even historical things that we disagree on and we talk about how do we see the disagreements. And the goal of it to create recognition. You don't need to agree, but you do need to understand and recognize the other. And that's one step to help deal with things before they erupt. And then the goal is the next step would be to build a relationship, to create a connection with somebody who you don't know. So that's just one example, but I think it can work in so many different ways.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll raise it up for one last chance for any questions or comments from the folks gathered here online. But yeah. Again, the book is The Future is Peace. And yeah, dualnarrative.org. Aziz just put in the chat. I also want to invite everybody to visit the Interact website. I can share the QR code here on the screen in a second, just so that we can.
And I put it in the chat too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of favors I'll need from you all. Is one, when you read the book, it makes a big difference if you do review it. So please, wherever you got it from, if you got it from an independent bookshop, you can review it on Goodreads. If you got it from Amazon, you can review it on Amazon's website. It's one of the simplest thing all of us can do, but most of us forget to do, and it does make a huge difference for us. So please do that. And the second thing is, if you allow me, I like to always finish my talks with the poem from Samih al-Qasim that's in the book. So the poem goes, "The day I'm killed." It's Samih al-Qasim is a Druze Palestinian poet, one of the most amazing people. And he wrote this poem about peacemaking. He says, "The day I am killed, the day I'm killed, my killer will find travel tickets. Rifling through my pockets will find travel tickets. One to peace, one to the fields and the rain, and one to the conscience of humankind. So I beg you, my dear killer, do not ignore such a thing. Do not waste the tickets. I beg you to take them and go traveling." And this is our plea with everyone who comes on this journey, reads a book, listens to us, is to take those tickets to peace, to the fields and the rain, and to the conscience of a humankind, and join us on this journey.
Aziz, thank you for that beautiful invitation. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bless you. Thank you. And God bless you. And thank you, everybody who's able to join us online and in person. Again, we have one more meeting next Thursday night at 7 p.m. again as a wrap up for the book. And so we'll be talking about the last chapters. And again, you'll have time to catch up even if you just want to purchase it even this week. And you can read it online. Also, the audiobook is available on Spotify, where Aziz and Maoz family member actually read the stories as well. So it's a beautiful opportunity. But thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for being a part of this community as we lean in together what it means to welcome, serve, and importantly tonight, to forgive. So thank you. And yeah, we'll see you around church.